believe in the gun. And our players don't use it most days. They use it every day.
In my 20 years as head coach, I've used the gun every single year. Well, my dream as a coach that everybody would grow up with the gun, because getting all those reps would make my job a lot easier.
Hello, everyone. Tom McDonald. I'm on the board of directors for the NABC. I'm the 2-year college coach rep. I'd like to introduce the panel for this forum, using your platform as a college or as a coach during the critical time. One that really brought this thing to our attention, or brought it to the webinar series, Ron Hunter, who's been a head coach at IUP UI at 1994 to 2011, Georgia State from 2011 to 2019, and then currently is the head coach at Tulane. And he was the one that brought all these distinguished coaches together for this panel. Kelvin Sampson, Oklahoma 1994 to 2006, Indiana 2006 to 8, NBA, the Bucks and the Rockets, and then now is currently the head coach at Houston, 2014 to present. Pat Chambers, Boston University 2009 to 11, Penn State 2011 to current. Gary Stewart, Coach Stewart, I'm going to do you a disservice, but I'm going to try to get all these in. Long Beach State, UCLA, Santa Barbara, Washington State, UC Davis, and then currently is the head coach at Stevenson. John Calipari, UMass, 1988 to 1996, went to the New Jersey Nets, Memphis, 2000 to 2009, and currently is the head coach of the University of Kentucky. Frank Martin, who just had surgery, and you'll see him in a minute, but he's with us today. And he was at Kansas State, 2007 to 2015, in South Carolina from 2012 to present. Ernie Kent, 1991 to 97, St. Mary's head coach, 97 to 2010 at Oregon, and then 2014 to 19, Washington State. Right now, Ernie Kent is on our board with the NABC. Frank Martin is on the board. John Calipari is on the board. Gary Stewart's on the board. And Ron Hunter has been on, and so is Kelvin Sampson. And then I just wanted to give you this because I think it shows an unbelievable commitment to this profession and to student athletes and their peers, and educating the next generation of coaches. Ron Hunter has been a member of the NABC for 36 years. Kelvin Sampson for 32 years. Pat Chambers for 17. Gary Stewart for 31, John Calipari for 35, Frank Martin 26, and Ernie Kent for 34. So with that, I'd like to thank and welcome all of you to the using your platform as a coach during this critical time. So Coach Hunter, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks for calling this meeting and bringing it to our attention and how we may help. So Coach Hunter, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate you kind of organize this and putting this thing together as quickly as you have. So, and then I want to thank also the men that you see here. Every one of these guys I called, and right away they said, let's talk about this and let's come together. So, especially during this time, I really appreciate all the coaches being here. So, guys, really, I wanted, as we talked about this, I want to kind of keep things informal. And this is an important time in our history right now, not only in the world, but also in our profession. There's a lot of things that are being said and being done. And from a coaching perspective, especially college basketball coaches, I thought it was important that we get together and really have education through conversation. And that's a lot of things that's been going on. We can educate people by conversations. And the conversation sometimes is not very comfortable. And so as you're seeing with the unrest and some of the protests and some of the things that are going on right now. And so each of you, we've been doing this for a very long time. And so what I like to do is just start off by asking each of you, you know, what's in the last few weeks, what has this done to you? What have you thought about this, not only as a coach, but as a man in this profession? And Coach Sampson, I'll start with you.
I think, and I think we're all basically going to be affected similarly. When I first saw the graphic of the white police officer from Minnesota with his knee in Mr. Floyd's neck, and then he had his hand in his pocket. To me, he might as well had a pillowcase over his head with his eyes dotted out and his nose dotted out. It just brought back memories of the Ku Klux Klan from the 50s and 60s. Where I'm from in North Carolina, we have a history with that. So we're all a byproduct of our experiences. So that's what I thought of. I thought that guy looked like he was from the Ku Klux Klan because he looked like he was enjoying what he was doing. The intent there was, it almost brought you to tears. But I also think it motivated me. It's almost like a call to arms. So I think that's probably something that drew all of us to be on this with you today, as webinar, Ron, because it did motivate us. I think if you'd have asked 50 coaches, every one of them would have said, yes, I want to be on. But it motivated me. It made me want to go hug my players, hug my family, tell them I love them, take care of them, but also give them a platform. I'm going to be real short here, but I gave all our kids a platform to talk and to share stories and to share their feelings. And just like what we're doing today, I think that was something that was positive that came out of it.
Coach, I really appreciate that, and that makes a lot of sense. And again, I hope a lot of coaches out there, understand. They talked about a lot of times we just need to listen sometimes, and so I think that's great. Frank, and I really want to say thank you. I know after having surgery yesterday and being able to do this, we've been friends for a long time, and so and I know how important this was to you. So how did this impact you?
Ron, I got mixed emotions on the whole thing. Because in my neighborhood, if it wasn't for the police officers, a lot of us would have not made it out. Police officers in our neighborhood, for the most part, made sure that we listened to our parents, that we stayed out of trouble, and they tried to steer us in the right direction. And but when I saw the act that Kelvin just displayed, just of disgust. My initial reaction was put me in a room with this guy for about 10 minutes. That was my initial reaction. But I'll tell you what had happened, man, because it triggered in me a situation I had in 1998. I was driving across country to work 5-star basketball camp at old Robert Morris University. And I got stopped in the middle of nowhere. And I had Dade County plates on my car. And a police officer, walked up to my window and said, what's a guy from your neck of the woods doing up here? And real sarcastically, and I said, sir, I'm driving to go work a basketball camp. He says, let me have driver's license and registration. So I give him my driver's license and registration. And at the time, I used to keep my hair in a flat top, really tight, and I had a goatee. And give him my driver's license, and he, my proper name's Francisco, middle name Jose. So now he starts making fun on how to enunciate my name. And he says, oh, you're one of those banana boat guys from down there where you're from. And so right that moment, I was kind of like trying to figure out how to handle that moment. And common sense told me, Frank, diffuse, which is what I believe in. I believe in diffusing, not escalating. And part of my frustration with society today is that we all question authority. And when authority steps in, I believe you shut up. And when they're wrong, then you got to understand how to handle that. And but it reminded me of that moment again. And it started to make me realize that as much as I've talked to my players about all this for the last 30 years, that I did the right thing at the moment when I didn't react to his sarcasm and his nastiness, where I, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And then he gave me 2 tickets, not one, and made fun of me again. And he was trying to incite me the whole time. And lucky to me, I always kept my cool. I didn't say anything to him. And he left and I left. And in retrospect, my biggest failure is that I never took action afterwards to file a complaint and create attention onto that. Because I'm a true believer that, you know, unfortunately, man, this is what I told our players. We have gotten so much better as a society, and we've gotten away from the stuff that Kelvin's talking about. But we're still close enough where some of that hatred still exists in people. And as we continue to fight to get that hatred, you're never going to make it go away. It's like cancer right now. I don't think there's a cure for it. But what we have to do, man, is we have to make sure that we never stop paying attention to it. We can't just do this every 4 or 5 years.
Right.
This has to be something. I say it all the time. Anytime you stop fighting against something, you got to work twice as hard to catch up when you start again. And that's kind of what I want to make sure, man, that we don't let these conversations disappear. That moment I had in 1998, we have to follow through with these things, because who knows what that guy's done to somebody after he let me go that day. So you know, things like that I'm real passionate about talking and hopefully making change.
Well, thanks, Frank, and no, that story hits home a little bit. And when, you know, it's funny when I thought about putting this together, I thought it was important that we got a wide variety of coaches, and not just black coaches, but minority coaches. And again, I think that all of us, you know, need to, because we're all family in this profession, and we all had different stories. And so I called Pat. I've known Pat for a while, and Pat agreed to do it, and without any hesitation. So Pat, I would like for you to go next and talk about your experience and how this impacted you.
Yeah, I want to start by saying thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the phone call. I definitely wanted to be a part of this, and thank the NABC for doing this as well. And Calvin, I've known you for a long time, and thank you for sharing that story, because I don't know, right? I don't know. I'm a white male. I don't know unless I ask more questions, and I need to do that. I think we all need to do that as a society, not just in the coaching world, because as coaches, our teams are such a great example of units coming together. If our country was more like our teams, we'd be in a such better place, all of us, if they were more like our teams, because our teams are melting pots of every race and religion, and it's just unbelievable to watch guys come together. So Calvin and Frank, thanks for sharing those stories. For me, I was angry. I was when I saw the video and sad. I had a pit in my stomach, and I guess heartbroken, it could be another good word. Not again, not again. And one of the first things I did is I talked to my players. I talked to James Franklin, who's become a great friend of mine, and Kevin Freeman, to just get educated. What am I missing here? Why is this still happening? Why? The question's why. For me, I've been in this business so long, and I've been a basketball player so long, that you get busy and you don't even think, right? We're part of this, right, Ron? We're part of this. This is what we're part of. This is what we do. But people on the outside maybe don't understand that fully to the degree that we do. So specifically over the last couple of years, I've really asked James and Kevin a lot of different questions on how we can get better. How I can get better, and what questions can I ask to keep this going, and what can I do for my players? What can I do for my program? What can I do for the communities and the cities? I mean, I played in Sunny Hill. You guys remember Sunny Hill? I mean, I'm from Philly, or just outside Philly, so it was disturbing. Racism and social injustice. We got to make this a consistent fight. That we're not going to stand for this, but it can't just be this call today. And we know this. It's got to be every single day. We got to continue this fight, but we got to partner up. We got to ask the questions, and we got to keep this communication going.
Yeah, Pat, that's great. And one of the things that a lot of my white counterparts or my white friends, one of the things that I've shared with them is that a lot of times it's just listening. Yeah, kind of what you talked about. But even more than listening, I think a lot of times it's, we've lived this our entire lives. And I would say also make sure you do your research. A quick story before I go to Ernie. I'm here in New Orleans, and they were protesting, and I'm outside with the protesters. And my car just happened to be on the street, and it was the only car on the street. White kid walks by with Black Lives Matter with the sign, has no idea that's my car, spits at my car and throws something into the window of my car. So white kid with Black Lives Matter have no idea that's my car. And so the first thing I thought about is that young kid has no idea what he's even marching about. And so a lot of time, that's why I talk about sometimes you just have to listen. And then our young people who I love what they're doing is that make sure you do your research. Make sure when you're walking out there, you understand what you're doing it for. And I think that's important. So I really appreciate what you said with that, Pat. Ernie, you want to go next?
Yes, first I want to thank you for putting this together. And we were all on prior to this becoming live, and just the camaraderie that we have in our coaching profession, I think it's pretty unique. We've been around each other, 20, 30 years. So I really appreciate all of you guys for speaking on this. When I first saw this, it instantly brought tears to my eyes. I mean, I literally cried. To hear a grown man in the last seconds of his life call out for his mother was just a profound impact on me. It made me sad, and more so because there was nothing you could do in that moment as you knew his cries and you knew his tears even that were there. And then from there, it became anger. It became anger because you have a flood of emotion and a flood of thoughts that start coming back into your head from when you were younger and at an age 9 and you were thrown into the back of a police car and driven around the park so a white lady could look at you to identify or not identify you as the one who had stolen her purse. And then a policeman drives you home, to where you're a freshman at the University of Oregon raving about Eugene and what a great community. And here it is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And you get pulled over by a police officer that's 20 yards behind you, telling you to freeze, don't move, put your hands on the dash. And my friend gets ready to get out the door, and I have to grab him and say, don't move. And at that time, you look through the mirror, and he's out with his gun drawn, kneeling behind his car with his gun pointed at your head. Those are scary moments, and they're life-changing moments that you are always in fear. Anytime you get pulled over, I don't care what city I am, anytime an officer pulls you over for anything, running a red light, driving too fast, you instantly have that feeling because you just don't know what is approaching your car. The face of that officer could have been the face of a lot of people that I've encountered in my life, that have been those people that have called through that N-word, that have yelled, screamed profanities at you just because of who you are. But more importantly, it made me think of my kids. And I felt really sad for them because they have grown up privileged. Because of the success we've had as coaches, we've been able to maybe put them in environments where they have a lot of things that normally kids their age don't have. And they still have some experiences that they're going to have to go through in this world. And I talked to them about that over the last couple of days when they do encounter something as impactful that some of the things that have happened to me in my life. I think, though, I went out last night because I'm up in Portland, Oregon right now. And I just wanted to experience for a few minutes the emotion of a march. And there were probably 4,000 people in that march. And you're in Oregon, so predominantly white. And I would say 95% of them were white and young. And Black Lives Matter signs, protect our freedom, all of these things that were coming out of them. And I just thought for a moment as I sat and watched for an hour from afar the event, and I thought if we do not take this moment in time as to what is going on in this country and come together and have the opportunity to change the trajectory of this country and where we're going, then shame on us, because there would have been a lot of people that have died in vain. And I hope that through this, there's a lot of rallying cries from coaches at all different levels, politicians, corporate people that you're starting to see. We need to change, and we really do. And that means everybody needs to take a hard look in the mirror at themselves, because we talk a lot about racism. There can be hatred going back and forth because of what you've experienced and what you've been through. And I think it's very, very important that all of us really look at that compassion in our heart as we move forward on all of this. So I'm just happy to be a part of this, and thank you again, Ron, for putting this together.
Good. Thanks, Ernie. Again, one of my friends that was easy to call. We probably talked 40 minutes the other day when I asked him to do this. Is John Calipari, and John and I were kind of going back, and a lot of you know when you talk to John, sometimes you're speaking of listening. I did all the listening on that day. So, but John, we appreciate you being on the call. And then what do you feel about this? How did it impact you as a coach and a man?
Well, first of all, let me say this, that you, Ron, and the other coaches on here, you guys know the respect I have for everybody on this call, and coaches in general, what we do and how we develop young people, and the challenges we all face. But, you know, first of all, there was shock, and then, like, I was sick. Like, how could one human being do that to another human being? What would lead you to do that? Led me to ask a lot of questions and listen to friends of mine that I respect and love. Kind of been pushed, stay out of it, you're white. I've been pushed the other way. You understand as much as anybody, you need to speak. But I wanted to sit back and listen and learn and figure things out first before I've spoken. And this is really the first time I've been on this kind of platform. But my wife and I looked at each other and we said, our lives have changed. You know, I came from a poor background. I mean, I don't want to get into all that, but where I am now is based on African-American families trusting me with their child. I wouldn't be here. Families of color trusting me with their child. Trusting me with their child to dream their dreams, their hopes, their desires, and understand. And I feel it's important to step up with whatever comes back at me to really think this through. Now, one of the things I can tell you, police brutality and ideas of policing and the criminal justice system, and I don't think I have an ability to influence, but I can donate to those funds, which I do. But my area of influence, my little corner where maybe I can do something, is my own players. How about keeping them safe, Ron? How about having the NBA security talk to my team about if you're approached by a policeman, how you respond? It is also about telling them they have a voice. And because you have that Kentucky uniform on, you may not be treated like people who look like you, but you better be ready to stand in when you see injustice. And we talk about educate yourself, know what they stand for, know what you can lose. And when you do that, then you get to the front of that line. Also teaching them about servant leadership, about being about others. How about this one, Ron? We go to our own staffs, and Frank, we have our own staff. And it's not just our assistant coaches. We got secretaries, receptionists. We got weight strength coaches. We got video basketball ops trainers. Are we creating access and opportunity for others in what we oversee? So when I went through that, this is something that I want to talk through with you guys, and you tell me if you think this is a good proposal that I'm going to put forward. And even if you don't, I'm going to do it anyway, but I would like to talk about it. You guys know me well enough. I'm going to propose to our athletic department that we start minority internships, not in basketball, but I'm talking about media relations. I'm talking about marketing, fundraising. You understand? How about the training staff? How about the weight training staff? How about the senior women administrator? How about we give access through athletics? Because what you talked about, Pat, is right. But we in athletics don't see it. But how about we get athletic departments to start looking different? That we can be an influencer on. I told our people that I'd be the point of funding. I look at this and I say, look, if we do this and it's about executive development, that we prepare young minorities for leadership, because we have issues with the number of African-American coaches or minority coaches. We do. Well, you have to have leadership that looks at it different. If we do it at Kentucky, my hope would be other schools call and say, how did you do this? What would it do? You may tell me with coronavirus, we're all going to be furloughed, losing. Let me tell you, there's one thing people would invest in right now, and it's a minority internship or executive development program at our schools, at our athletic departments. My hope would be there are many careers out there that minorities don't have access and opportunities to. They would look at us, not only in basketball and basketball coaching, but in our athletic departments and say, how did you do that? How did you get to this point? Teach us and show us. Might take 10 years, may take 20 years, but I think athletic departments should look different. But for all of us on this call, the one thing we do have influence over is to create access and opportunity for more minorities. So that's kind of where I'm headed. And you guys all know when I get started on something, I'm a bulldog. Like, this is now, and it's taken me, some time to really come to, for all of us. We're all trying to say, what difference can I make? Like me, little me, what can I do? But I'm saying to everybody, you can look for things out there that you can do to make a difference in where this all goes.
Ron,
Cal, let me hold on for a second, Ray. Cal, I appreciate that, but I do want to add to this that, and I think that's a great idea. But again, I don't think that would change so much of the social injustice that has happened. And I say that because I think all of us, and I'm really right now speaking to the African-American coaches, we've all been pulled over and we're doing pretty well. You can be an associate AD, again, the color of your skin, regardless of your education sometimes in our society, really won't matter in that regard. Now, I completely agree with you that we've got to make sure that we do it. Hell, just in our own business, in our own profession, we need to do better with minority hiring, and we need to see, like you said, in our athletic departments and at the president's office also. We, not just in athletics, but at our president's office where we see more minorities in some of those things. And so, and before Gary goes, all of us are probably on the backside of our coaching careers right now. I don't want to keep doing this. Every first team meeting I've had over the last few years, I bring in a judge and I bring in a police officer. And I bring them in, first of all, Cal, what you said, Cal, to talk about when the police pull you over, have your hands on the wheel, look straight ahead, don't reach for anything. I bring a judge in to talk about, making sure you have the right representation. I did not think that after all this time and in 2020 that's my first meeting every year, teaching my kids how to get arrested or when the police come. And so we've got to get it to the point for the younger coaches that are out there or that next generation. Man, I hope that's not the case, that on their first team meeting that we don't have to get to this. So Cal, I'm 100% behind you.
Let me say this, Ron. I got to tell you, I understand there's got to be different police training. But again, my influence, how do I influence that? How do I influence? And if anybody on this call can tell me how I would influence the criminal justice system, but I know this, if 10 years from now, I can look back and I could see the opportunities others would never have had, all of us on here get involved in this, we can look back and say, you know what, I made a difference. Forget about how many games we win, national championships, final, this our children will be with. So I say this to you, Ron, it was not trying to say, this will change that, but I do know this. Every family for their child wants access and wants opportunity. That's it. You don't have to give me this. Just give me access so I can get in. In athletics, our departments need to change how they look. They do.
I agree.
They do. And I can say this would be a path to that. Would it be the end all, do all? No. But here's where I am. I just want to do something. I'm not going to sit back. I'm here because of African American families and families of color. I'm here. I mean, are you kidding me? I don't deserve to be the coach of Kentucky. Who the heck am I? But I'm here because of them. And I'm saying, all right, how do we do this? But anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted again, Ron.
No, thanks, John.
Ron, I know we got to jump to Gary, but I just want to say one thing about what John talked about.
Sure.
You know, I have fielded a ton of phone calls over the last few days. And those phone calls are coming in from white coaches, friends, administrators as to what do we do? I've never experienced racism. The very fact that I'm getting those calls is the very fact that we talk about institutionalized racism. Because when all of your search firms, the majority of them, 99% of them are white, the athletic director is probably 99% white, your president's probably 99% white, and your regents are there, it's very difficult to think we're going to just flood in all these people of color. But maybe something like this will spark the understanding that if you are calling me because you're not diversified enough, that tells you what is wrong in our society today. In particular, in a sport where we are predominantly black on the floor, and that's not what it looks like on the sidelines, our administration, our athletic departments. It's just not it. So it's very difficult to think that's going to change overnight, but that is the very essence of why people are marching. It's because of that institutionalized racism that people don't always see, and all of a sudden is brought to the forefront.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure we get Gary before I go to the next question. Gary, you want to comment?
Yeah, Ron, thanks for having me. I think when that situation happened and I looked at the video, a litany of emotions went through my mind. You know, the anger, the frustration, the why, you know, all those type of things. But then I started to wrap my arms around a family member being in that position, a student athlete, an alum, somebody in our community, somebody on our campus. Much like what Cal talked about, I'm not sure where to go. I'll be the first one to admit that. I'm not sure, do I go this direction or this direction? I've leaned on a lot of you. I've called you, Ron. I've talked to Frank, Ernie multiple times, Cal. So I've leaned on a lot of coaching friends to try to get some direction. But I do know that we have to try. We have to try to make some change. And we have to try to move the needle. And I think that's our responsibility. When I addressed my team the other day, I said that we didn't choose this moment. The moment chose us. But now what's required is a response. And I think we have to start with the why. Why are we here? Why did it happen? Why does it continue to happen? And much like the comment about cancer, maybe it doesn't get eradicated in our lifetime, but we've got to do better than this. This is a humanitarian issue. The situation with George Floyd was inhumane. We're simply better than this.
Okay.
And Ron, I'm so grateful for this opportunity, for this platform. Because we do need to have some meaningful dialogue. We need to throw some things up on the wall and vet those things because there's systematic issues involved in this. I think we all know that a badge didn't kill George Floyd. An evil person with a badge killed him, and so. We've got to eradicate that out of our society. We've got to be able to identify that early and eradicate that. And you're as guilty as the person kneeling down if you see that and don't have a response to it before a life is taken. So we got a lot of challenges, Ron. We got a lot of certainly we got a lot of big issues in front of us, but we've got to try. We've got to make an effort and. As a basketball coach, we owe that to the student athletes and the families and everybody that we're helping.
Thanks, Gary. Really, and Pat, I think you had something you wanted to. Before I go on to my next question.
You know what? It's kind of what Cal, based on what Cal was saying, and Gary was saying. You know, what's the why? Why is this still happening? And Cal wants to help. He wants to do something, and such great ideas. And, you know, obviously for me, it starts at home, right? I have to teach my children. I have 4 kids, 11 to 4 years old, and we're teaching them the right way. I'm firm in that of faith in God being first in their lives. And I know that's how we have to treat everybody as a human being. But secondly, it's education. So I would say to Coach Cal, put your money to some inner city schools and try to help those kids. They don't have a chance. And that's the problem. That's where it's starting at such an early age, because the school education system in so many different areas, specifically Philadelphia, I'm thinking Philadelphia right now, it's just not up to par. It's not up to par. It's not good enough. And I need to think about what I need to do and how I can help that situation. So that's just what I would say.
Well, Pat, I appreciate that, because that leads right into where I want to kind of go with this. And I'm going to start with Coach Sampson on this. And one of the things when I decided let's get this thing together and let's just talk, I didn't want this to be, you know, you're just talking about what's kind of going on and this and that. What I really wanted to talk about is, you know, that symbol on the bottom of the screen says National Association of Basketball Coaches, and that's what we are. But what can we do to make a difference? What can we do to help the next generation of our coaches? What can we do to help our young people, our kids that, you know, outside of having the meetings to talk about putting your hands on there when you follow on the steering wheel? And so, Coach, and you're right in Houston. So, Coach, what is it that we can do that you feel like we can make a difference as a profession?
You know, when I was speaking earlier, Pat said something that's been resonating in this country for the last 8 days. The hardest thing, I think, for some white people to talk about is what is racism. You know, some people say, well, I'm not racist. Well, there's a difference in being non-racist and anti-racist. Are you non-racist or are you anti-racist? What is racism? Why did that police officer Chauvin, why did he look like he was enjoying doing what he did? How can you not define what he did as not racial injustice? Now we can talk about opportunities and you know, putting more people that are people of color in positions. But the thing that's got to be talked about and defined and let people understand is racism. You know, it's like what Drew Brees was talking about. You know, we can't run from that conversation. We can't act like that conversation didn't happen. Why did he look at the flag different than Colin Kaepernick? To me, that's where we have to start. You know, and we can't run from it. Racism is real, man. It is real. There's a reason why black daddies and black mamas right now are scared to death when a white police officer pulls their son over. That's real. And until we face that and define what racism is, and Frank said it, are we going to eradicate it? Of course not. It's like cancer. You know, chemo helps, but it may come back. But if we don't get motivated now, if we don't have some hope and some faith, that I see more white boys and white girls, white men and white women walking down streets, holding their hands and say, I can't breathe, we can't breathe, I can't breathe, please don't shoot, whatever it is that they're saying. And now is the time to push forward on things. But kids, when we're coaching these kids and they leave our supervision, they go other places and they're looked at differently and they're treated differently. Sometimes it can be a tough world out there. George Floyd, when he woke up that morning, he had no idea that he was going to die. He had no idea that he was going to go see a rogue white police officer that was going to kill him, with racial injustice probably being at the core of why he died. So until as coaches we have that talk and address these things, I don't know. I don't know if we're just talking in circles. I grew up in the South. I know what racism is. I know what white colored another is. I was raised in those tobacco markets and those restaurants. That's how old I am. So I understand racism, but it doesn't get talked about enough. Black kids need to know. Black kids need to know that it is okay. It's okay to live in this world and be successful. But you're going to have other people not like you because of the color of your skin. The flag is going to mean something different to this group of people and this group of people. So I just like to see us talk about that.
Yeah, Coach, and I agree with you. And I know 3 or 4 of you have talked about coaches versus cancer, and we're all involved with that. And we've been involved with it for a long period of time. I would hope that's what this stays to. I hope that as much as we invested from the NABC into coaches versus cancer, that racial injustice is something that should not go away. And I know that Frank's going to end up leading a group with that. But as the NABC, as members, that should be just as important as coaches versus cancer. So I know, Tom, you just sent me something, and because I want to make sure it's just not us talking. There are questions. We've got a great group of people out there, and they've got questions for us. So, Tom, you want to go ahead and ask the question?
Yep. Here's the first one. It was to Ernie, but I think it's relevant to all of you. Is for a white high school basketball coach, they've taught for 25 years. They're a teacher also. What suggestions do you have for a coach in a mostly white school with lack of diversity in its population to bring about some understanding and compassion?
I had a friend of mine, Mickey Fern, that teaches at NC State, and he talked about having to teach, and he teaches a class on racism, and he talked about having to teach young people from rural, out in the boondocks in North Carolina that were in this class that had never really had any experience being around Black people and having a Black teacher, but yet throughout this process of educating, let's talk about where this began. Let's talk about Dr. King. Let's talk about Jim Crow. Let's talk about how we got here. He was so moved by the emotion that came out of these young people by the time they had gotten through this course. I think people do have the ability to learn. I think as a coach, it is your job to educate yourself. I think there are enough tools and avenues out there for you to learn, to educate yourself, that you do give the right type of message. Because as a coach, we always talk about team. We always talk about family. Well, indeed, if you are the head of your family, it is your job to lead your kids and educate your kids so they understand. So I would put that responsibility on that coach to better equip himself, and then don't fear, because kids through social media, they understand Black culture already. And I think you have an opportunity to help them understand something a little bit deeper than just Black culture, but how we got here today. So I would encourage any coach that's in an environment where you're in a predominantly white environment, maybe there's not a lot of diversity around you. There are avenues and ways that you can educate yourself, and I would not fear whatsoever to step up as the head of your household, the head of your family, the head of your team, to educate your athletes, because I think that's extremely important for them. It's extremely important for you as well, too.
Do any other coaches want to kind of jump in on that question before I go to something else?
Take them in the hood, man. Take your students in the hood. Make them go into the Black community and see how they live, into my community and see how we live. Make them go spend a day buddy students with students in an inner city school, so they see the differences in education in a public school in the inner city compared to that suburban school. Take them to some kind of a function at whatever community center, Here we got the spot that Xavier McDaniel and Tyrone Corbin and those guys grew up in. In Miami, we had it's called Gibson Park, and that's where the black folks in the inner city, they have their community conversations. Take those kids in there, man, so they see the difference. So they see the difference, the interaction that happens in school, in class, between teacher and student. So they respect the journey. They respect the journey. And if you start making young kids comfortable with being in that environment at that age, then they will grow up to become white adults that are comfortable and engaging in the hard conversations. Because that's the biggest problem we have now. If you look at all the protesters, that's my saving grace right now, is every riot that I've ever lived has been predominantly one race. Mm-hmm. Now I'm watching protesting that involves all kinds of different ages, faces, cultures, people. So to the point that everyone's making, people are vulnerable right now that they want to listen. But how do you make an adult listen? Well, you teach him how to listen when he's a kid. And you teach him how to be willing. Two things. In this country, we all running a race. We run a race from the day we're born to trying to find success. Some people run a 100-yard dash. Some people run the 110-yard hurdles. Not everyone runs the dash. And the people that run the hurdles, sometimes you got to go over, under, around, or even through. Some people give in and don't have the fight or the hurdles overcome them. They can't get to the finish line. But then those of us that run the hurdles, when we get to the finish line, the biggest problem we got is now we end up with the people that ran the 100-yard dash. And as all of us know, because life's been good to us, we end up in a different group of conversations with people. And when we get to that moment, white folks don't want to talk about race. They try to avoid that as quick as they can. But here's the problem. Guys like me, then we get quiet because we don't want to ruffle the feathers of the establishment and end up losing our jobs. And we owe it to the John Thompsons, the John Cheneys, the George Ravelings, that back in the 80s, they stood up against systemic racism because they didn't use this fancy word. Now, this has become a fancy word. They stood up against the systemic racism that existed on college campuses and admissions and all the above, which still exists to this day.
Prop 48.
Absolutely. They stood up to it, and everyone tried to make them the bad guy. I don't know if anyone remembers the next day when those guys walked out, Dean Smith went public and said, if he walks out next game, I'm walking out too. All of a sudden, Prop 48 went away. But then as those guys started getting out of the profession, here comes a different version of Prop 48. And so there's things in place that when we get to the finish line, like I said this the other day, Ron, Anthony Grant is since we were two little kids together. Only difference is when it was time to go home, I went to the south side of the river, he went to the north side of the river. He told me, as two grown men, both successful, no longer in the hood, he said, Frank, every day I get in my car, I'm worried. I said, about what? And he said, about what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. We need to share these stories more often. We can't wait. Like, we had an uproar on this the last election cycle. And there was a gentleman that got murdered, Philando Castillo, I believe was his name, also in Minnesota. And we had the situation here in Charleston, South Carolina, and we had the situation in Ferguson. And all those took place, and all of a sudden there was an uproar. The two years that the Black Lives Matter movement had any kind of real movement was 2016 and 2020, election years. But it gets real quiet in between. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm saying, man, we got to stay with these conversations, and people are vulnerable right now to listening. But if I was that teacher, I'm telling you, I've always said this because it's the life I lived. You bring people from the suburbs and drop them off in the hood, they're so nervous, they can't wait to get out. You take a dude from the hood and you drop him off in the suburb, and Kelvin, like we were joking about before, all of a sudden I'm not Francisco, I'm Frank. And I'm accepted. And I kind of learned to fit in. And, you know, but it's take them in there, man. They got to learn to understand, man. There's places in this country that have systemic racism in place that connects with what we're talking about, from Cal to to Pat to you, Ron. And it eliminates, we educate young people to be comfortable with having these conversations when they become adults.
Well, it's funny you say that, Frank, because I think that
kids are vulnerable too, Ron, because I'll guarantee you those kids are listening to black music. And that teacher goes and spends some time with them, they might be more open to learn about this more than what he thinks, because they've been exposed to it already. He just doesn't realize it because he doesn't listen to that kind of music. But our culture is a great way to open the door to some big, tough discussions.
And I think that we have to, you keep using the word comfortable, and I even the question that was before that, but all of our lives, you know, especially, and I grew up in an all-white school, you know, no one asked me if I was comfortable at the all-white school, you know, and that's what I talk about, even these conversations. And so it's important that again, that, you know, and I've talked to you about this a little bit, Cal, is when we talk about our kids and what's comfortable and what's not comfortable. And that's why we need to continue to have this conversation. But you mentioned before, what are we going to do about it? We have discussions, we talk about our experiences, but at some point, we, you know, I before we started this, they gave the number of years that we've all been on the NABC and the board and part of the organization. And we spent a lot of time talking about rules and the transfer deal and the NBA draft and who comes out early. And those are all important things in our life, because it evolves around basketball. But at the end of the day, there's nothing greater than what this issue is about. You know, again, how do we make sure that 18 and 19-year-old that we're coaching this year, that 10 years, 20 years from now, he's not going through this? And as a profession, I think it's an opportunity that we have, and we don't get these opportunities a lot. Just like what you said with John Thompson and Cheney and those guys, they took advantage of a time that needed it. And I think we're at that time now. And Cal, you said something to me earlier this week, man. It's every day I've been waking up thinking about it. You said, well, Ron, we got to come up with solutions. Just talking about it doesn't really, you know, we'll forget about it in a week. But what is that solution? And that's really where I want to kind of get to right now. And we may not have the solution, but we need to start talking about what solutions do we have, or that we can come up with, that would make sense so we don't have to continue this. And so I throw that out to anyone.
I think we're all in the world of education. I still, to this day, I believe that there's a systemic racism, SATs, in place for education. I think our country is set up in a way that it's the haves and the have-nots. The haves figure out a way to get to education, to get to a college campus and get educated. The have-nots never get that opportunity. And it gets really, really complicated. And if you think about inner city kids, Ron, what are the three vehicles that get out? Music, sports,
yeah,
or any kind of acting or entertainment. And for that avenue, they still got to get educated.
Yeah.
And I think the greatest service that we provide, all the people, the young people that we coach, has been completely devalued with this whole one and done, zero and done, let's pay them, all this other stuff, all that shit, shit sounds good, but we devalued the opportunity for the education of somebody that without basketball would not have ended up on a college campus with the future CEOs of companies, so they can one day get hired whenever their playing careers are over. You know, so I think we got to make sure we talk and let everyone know about everything we're talking about. But I think our whole deal, man, is this systemic racism that exists. And I'm telling you, John Thompson and those guys stood up for it, and Dean Smith gave them cover, because I was still a young high school coach back then. Those guys got covered from Dean Smith to get what he needed passed. And when he gave him the cover, then everyone jumped on board and it got changed. But then as Coach Thompson retired, Coach Chaney retired, they slid it back in there. Who stood up and fought it the next time around? No one did. So now we've got the same systemic races. It's all those tests are culturally biased for kids that go to those schools in Philly that Pat was talking about. They're culturally biased. I don't care what you tell me. They're coach. I'm a JUCO guy, not because I'm not smart enough, because no one in my school ever told me I need to take an SAT test. So it's something I had to waste my time for 2 hours on a Saturday, so I couldn't get a good score. And so I think it all goes hand in hand.
Hey,
So
Ron,
go ahead, Pat.
What you know, we're all on CVC. We do a great job. There's a model there that it sounds like Frank's going to be the head of a coalition. There's a model there that we could take from for sure in this situation. I mean, all the time we spend on CVC and all the advertisements that's all over the networks that we all play on. You see CVC all the time. I mean, that's a good place to start. And then we branch out, like we go to high schools and we go to, well, recruiting. Now there's NCAA rules we're talking about too. But I think there's a model that we can look at when we talk about CVC, and we know how cancer is just, it's never ending. It doesn't take a day off, but neither does racism. So do we take that model, Frank, since it sounds like you're going to be the head of this, which is awesome. And I'd love to be a part of it because I need to still listen and ask questions and learn and be educated for myself to be the best coach and leader I can be. Is that the model that we use? Is that something that we could get? Is that sustainable and consistent? That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah. Hey, I'd like to make one more point. And as I watch television, it's hard to watch the news for me right now because the news is so slanted on whatever channel you got on. It's hard to watch. But you know what I've learned watching all these different mayors and police chiefs being interviewed? How many minority mayors and police chiefs we've got right now.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the case 20 years ago. So we have to keep fighting and patient that our leaders are coming from places like us and pressure them because here, Ron, this is something I say all the time. Everyone that sits in the third row at our games, every media member across the court, everyone watching on TV at home, they think they know what's going on in our locker rooms. They got no idea what goes on in our locker rooms. They got no idea what's going on between coaches, between players, player to coach, coach to player. They got no idea. They all come up with these assumptions. Well, it's the same way with us. We don't know what happens behind the front line of the police department. We don't know what happens behind, like, the politicians. My neighborhood's been a train wreck for 40 years. Why hasn't it changed? Say that in the same kind of political leadership, rah, 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 let's get elected. But nothing changes, man. Nothing changes. And that's where I don't know how we can impact those places unless they let us in behind the scenes. If they don't let us in behind the scenes, there's nothing we're pulling at straws.
If there were mayors, I'm going to ask you this, Frank, and then I'm going to go to you, Kelvin. So you just talked about that you looked on television and you saw because I've noticed the same thing, the number of black mayors, the number of black police chiefs. If the mayors and police chiefs were looking inside of our business, would they see systematic racism? Would they see equality in college basketball in regards to the hiring and some of the things that we talked about?
I don't think they got a clue, but if we showed it to them, I think they'd laugh at us. You know, and I just told, I don't know if it was Cal or Bob Huggins 2 days ago. You know, part of my mission is getting a group of us together. We're going to go sit down with senators in Washington, D.C., and we're going to start showing them some stuff. They meddled into our business when they started meddling into the transfers and the name, image, and likeness. They never meddled in our business. Well, they meddled in our business, so now we're going to bring our business to them. And I'm going to see how involved they're going to get on some of these systemic racism that exist in admissions to these universities. Like, for example, special admit. Your guys' schools have any of those?
Used to.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing, man.
That's
That's
how we got
embarrassing. You're gonna go over and
Let
one
me-
of your kids is a special admin. Come on, man.
Frank, with what you guys are talking about, one is we probably got to get every one of our kids to vote, get them to sign up and vote. And we got to get them to vote down the ballot, because I believe this stuff is going to change. Frank, you're talking about being comfortable. You can't have it from top down, tell us how to think and how to act. Doesn't work. It's got to be bubbled up from the bottom. It's got to come grassroots. It's got to be people coming together. How many of us on this call, or how many people listening to this call, looked at somebody and they weren't real comfortable with them, but all of a sudden they got in their company and they talked and they said, I really like that guy. That guy's a good guy. So how do we get to where we bring people together? Now, I'm going to be honest. I am listening here to everything you're talking about, that systemic, the police, the justice system. I'm looking at myself saying access and opportunity, hope. I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine took me to, and again, a different country in Haiti, to a school that he had built. Flew me down, flew into Dominican, took a helicopter. It was Pierce Lines from Alltech, in a helicopter to the school he built. Well, it was in a village that didn't have roads. It was in a village that had no businesses. And I was kind of depressed. And he said, what's wrong? I said, even if you educate them, there's no hope. There's no opportunity. What did you really do? And he was then taking a group of these kids. And when they graduated, he said, I'm going to bring them to the University of Kentucky. I said, now you're making me smile. I don't believe that stepping into a community and acting like you're doing something that makes us feel better and then leaving. If you want change, Frank, the pressure's got to be on the politicians. They will not change unless they feel pressure, and it's extended pressure. That makes them uncomfortable, and that's when they change. If they're not afraid of anything going on, they're not moving. So one would be, I would say, vote. Vote your conscience, and we should have all of our players learn to sign up to vote, and they should vote.
Well, one of the things that I've liked from day one, the most important thing I've heard came from Eric Reveneau, the assistant coach at Georgia Tech. He was the one that came up with the idea that November 2nd or 3rd, what is that? November 3rd is that's when all the elections are. November 3rd. That should be an automatic day off. None of this cara rara stuff. No practice that day. Every student athlete is going to go vote. Now, some of this will be absentee voting. Some of it will be take them down and put them in a stall and let them see what voting is all about. But every one of our kids should be registered to vote. We should educate them on the candidates and what the candidates are running on. What's important to the candidates. Explain to them the difference in Republicans and Democrats and what the Democrats are pushing, what the Republicans are pushing, and how that affects you as a white person, how it affects you as a black person, how does it affect you as an American? Because for some reason today, even during this pandemic, I'm trying to figure out these CDC guidelines, and all I hear is just all this divisive rhetoric. I want to hear something that's going to bring this country together. And everything that we've talked about was started because of police brutality. That's what got everybody started. What that guy did to George Floyd was the springboard. Police brutality. So how do we educate on that? Criminal justice reform, racial injustice, all these things. But it all goes back to who can we put in office to put us in the best position to love each other, to teach each other with decency, to help people in the third ward over. I'm 2 blocks away from the third ward. That's where George Floyd was born and raised. 2 blocks from here, right across Scott Street. What are we doing to help the younger George Floyds, the people that look like George Floyd? What have we done to make their lives better? And that's grassroots. And it starts with education, voter rights, educating them on what this world's about. I mean, we can talk about a lot of things, but I think if we start with voter registration and explain to them why they're voting and who they're voting for and what they stand for, will help a lot.
Go ahead, Ernie. I think you had.
Ron, all of those are just are great ideas. And I think even as a community outreach, not only do you get registered, you might be able to find somebody in the community that's not able to get to a voting booth that you could help get there as well too. But I want to get back to something you talked about. If those senators looked inside of our programs, inside of NABC, NCAA, what do they see? And we've got to be careful because a little bit hypocritical, and because we've kind of got to get our own house in order if we're going to go out and go start talking to senators and all of those things, because we're in a situation right now, and I'm not saying anything that I haven't said in front of the board and in front of the NCAA, that we've got young African-American assistant coaches that are morally handcuffed right now because we have them on missions to go out and recruit at any cost, bring me players at any cost, get them back to my campus, and then you're responsible for mentoring those players as well. And you have those young assistants that are paid, in most cases, extremely well at the Power 5 level that have no opportunity to leave those jobs and elevate to get a head coaching position. The optics of that are horrible, that you see them in the homes recruiting your son, and then they come to campus and they have no say in playing time, decision makers, and all those things. So that's the head coach that's sitting there. And with our low number of African-American head coaches, somebody's going to turn to us and say, why is this happening as well? And what do we have in place that can change this as well too? When young people get to your campus, I'm a strong believer that they are already successful. The fact that they've come from inner cities to an Oregon or to a Kentucky, to where they're going to have to change in a lot of cases how they act, how they handle themselves, because they're in new environments. And if you can understand that once they go through that, and let's say they are not NBA players, these young people are so equipped to be successful because they've been on a team, they've handled pressure, they understand leadership, they understand failure, they have had themselves out in front of the masses on camera, on TV. It's just helping them to understand that transition, that they do not become an athlete or a pro player, that they still are very valuable to our society because they are equipped to be extremely successful. But all that starts with, what do we look like within ourselves? Our board, our coaching staffs, our administrations, because we're going to have a hard time trying to justify something on the outside that it's affecting us right now on the inside of our own association.
Ron, I got a question for Ernie.
Yeah.
Tell me, we all know that there are not enough minority coaches. We all know, we've talked about it. What's the solution? And anybody else wants to answer that. The solution. My second question will be about police brutality. Disgusting. I just watched on TV, I almost punched the TV in Buffalo, New York. They pushed over a 70-year-old guy and the guy's ears bleeding and they walk by. I mean, this is great. Okay. What are the solutions? If you're looking at me and you say, Cal, here's what you can do. If you tell me we need more minority coaches, why don't we, and what's the solution?
Well, let's start off with what you just said. First of all, I think, and it goes back to, maybe it was Pat or Frank that brought this up, but first of all, we have to have people that look like us that are athletic directors. Secondly, we've got to have people.
All right, so I got to stop you, Ron. How do we get to that?
How do we get to be athletic directors?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to the next part, is that the next part of it has to be, there has to be more representation from the presidents. But yet,
how do we get to that, Ron? I mean, that's where I'm saying.
Conzo Martin had a great idea, Cal. We always push our guys, if they can't play, to coach. Put them in administration. Grab some of our players that they can't play anymore and say, come here, man. You're going to work as an assistant athletic director. You're going to be an administrator. I think we fail them when we don't put them in those opportunities. I thought that was a great idea as a path for what you're talking about.
Cal, the question you pose is the same question that's going on in Division I football, the NFL. It's everywhere. Yep. And there's not one solid answer to it. But I think the fact that the one thing that's come out of COVID-19 to me is that it has made the NCAA, corporate America, even America, very susceptible to change, because nobody knows where the target is, where we're going to come out of all of this. We don't know financially where we're going to be. We don't know from the rules where we're going to be. So now we get to have those tough, difficult conversations to get creative, to find if there is a path. There is a path that we can get to that gives opportunity for more African-American coaches, because again, the optics of what we're doing in a business that is for Black is it's not very good right now.
Okay. Well, before we go on, you guys are doing such a great job, but we've got questions all over the place. Tom, go ahead and I'll let you slide in here and get a question in before we start wrapping it up.
Sorry about that. One thing I wanted to say, and I sent this to Coach Hunter, the NABC has made a recommendation that there be no practices on Election Day, just so you all have that, because there's been a lot of dialogue on that. That's one. Two is there's a question on what advice do you give or do you have for a white coach and a white staff to begin the conversation with their team, both Black and white student athletes? I'm sure I'm putting a word.
Tom, I'll interject in that one right away.
Yep.
They don't know, man. There's no conversation they can start that speaks from the soul, that speaks from reality. It's all hearsay. It's like bringing that police officer to talk to our team before the year, and he tells me, hey, man, do right, do this, don't stay out of trouble, don't go here, make sure your hands are where I can see them. It's got to be. There's no. It's just like me. Like there's nothing anyone can tell me that didn't grow up in the Cuban neighborhood in Miami of what this culture is all about. That you can't be out in the suburbs and teach anybody about our culture unless you come from it, unless you see it. So that's why you have to, like the Third Ward, Kelvin, that area is unbelievable. But it's been like that I've been around 54 years, at least since I'm old enough to understand, it's been like that. It hasn't changed. And there's views from people that have never been in there that don't understand it, so there's hate right away. And so I don't think I don't think you can teach. These are things that I don't think you teach out of a book. I read about slavery. I didn't experience that. My family didn't experience that. I read about it in a book when I was in history class in high school. The day I stepped foot on a real plantation and I saw slave headquarters, it blew my mind. It completely changed, like any thoughts that I had. It completely made them clear. You got to take people to that so they can understand the difference. That's my biggest thing.
Pat and John, I would like for you guys to answer that question. Because again, it sounds like that coach was white that asked the question. I'm not sure, but I would like for you guys, and when your team comes back on campus in the next week or two, what do you say?
Go ahead, John.
Well, I've been saying we've had Zoom calls and I've stayed up, and anything that I say, I run by my team first. Whatever I'm going to do is on their behalf too. And I would make this statement for every African-American person of color listening. And I read this somewhere. And when I read it, I said, this is how I feel. I understand that I may never understand, but I stand with you. That, for me, when I bring my guys back, I make them talk. I want them to talk about situations. It's just hard if you're all white staff and all white players, like Frank's saying, I don't know what you would do in that situation unless you bring in people to your staff to talk to them, or you bring in players from another team that come in. We want you to talk to us about what you go to. That would be what I would do. And with us, when we come back, I'm trying to figure out a way to get our athletes with the police, with the community in town, with our Urban League friends, and say, let's lock down a street and let's do some things together, and let's end with conversation from each other. So we'll probably do something like that when they come back. But I'm on, Zoom, and I text them. So I'm trying to stay on this to let them know, here's how I feel. I asked them about the internship program. I don't mean to go back to it. They all loved it. You're giving people an opportunity. We talk about changing ADs. You got to get more people involved in the athletic department that are of color so that they can eventually move to those positions. The team loved it. When I asked them, am I gone too far, not far enough? One, Keon had a great comment. For right now, you're doing all the right things, Coach, but it may change. And you may need to say different things in another 2 weeks, which I just keep trying to listen. Frank, you made great sense. And I want to listen to Kelvin. I want to listen to Ernie. I want to listen to Gary. And now I like listening to Pat because he'll face some of the same things I face. So let me just say this one thing. People said I shouldn't talk. Pat, you probably heard the same thing. You don't understand, you don't get it. That's why that statement, I understand. I may never understand, but I stand with you. But here's the thing that I felt. All these players that have carried me and my family, I think I need to speak. All these players who have put me and my family and my children in that position, I've got to speak. There'll be people mad on both sides. They're mad that I'm even saying anything. Have at it. I don't know what to say to you. All I know is I feel obligated that I need to do and say, and not only talk. That's why I want to do this program at our university. Let's do something and see if it makes a difference.
But John, before Pat starts, let me say that, John. Of all the people that's on this panel today, the two people that are going to make the biggest difference is going to be Pat and John. It's not going to be Ron. It's not going to be Kelvin or Ernie or Gary or Frank. It's going to be you. When white people start fighting against racism, when it becomes important to you, when it's more important to you than it is to us, that there's something wrong with police brutality. We need to reform the criminal justice system. We need to get out and vote. Something is wrong. The worst thing that's happened in our country today is racism. When it's more important to Pat and John, when you guys are leading the fight, that's when I know we got a chance.
And I'll say this, Kelvin, you know me, how long have we known each other? You know I will stand out in front and take arrows. As a matter of fact, I got bazooka holes in my back, so the arrows go straight through. They go right through and they don't hit anything. But I was on a call, and Frank, you were on the call, and I said, talk to me. I'd like to be an agent of change. We all should as coaches, but what is the change? What do we do for police brutality? Do I go down to the courthouse? Do I go to I'm at a loss. The only thing I know in my mind, in my area of influence, create access and create opportunity. I've done it within my own staff. But how do I do it within our athletic department? And all of you here on this call, you look at your athletic department, mostly white. It's what it is. And mostly men. How do we change that? How do we start there? Ron, if we can change that, you'll have more black coaches. And maybe the other side of the campus will look at us and say, what have you done to have such diversity in your athletic department? We have interns. Why don't you have the same? Minority interns on educational side. Do it. And then maybe businesses come to us and say, how did you do this? Because only 8 years ago, all the athletic staffs were mostly white. All the ADs were mostly white. How does this change? This is how you do this. I'm just saying, there were people that I've been in company with that I've seen, and at a distance I go, nah. And then I meet with them and I'm close to them, and all of a sudden I go, that dude right there is one of the best humans I've ever met. But before I heard him speak or talk or say something or react, you just don't know. Frank, how do we do things, and Kelvin, to bring, on all of you on here, to bring people together and rally black and white, old and young together. I'm seeing it in the protests.
Yeah.
Old, young, black, white, brown, yellow. They're there. How do we harness this? I don't know. I wish I knew. I'd run for something. I don't know. I don't have the answers.
John, I'm listening to you, and you're one of the most successful coaches that's ever coached this game.
No, I've been lucky. I've been lucky, Ernie.
You
My
might be,
dad even says I've been lucky. He says, I don't know how you do it, kid. Keep fooling them.
you've had great talent, and with you and Frank and Pat, but you guys have got to understand, you've been recruiting 10, 20, 30 years. You've been in and out of these inner cities. You've been in homes. You've been right in front of mom that's just a mom in that home. You have an ability with the platform you're on to articulate exactly what you did, and they're going to be the masses listening to you that have never even dealt with a black person before. And yet, for 30 years, you've been there. The intelligence that you guys can bring to the table, the articulation, I think, will affect the masses because of who you are, the stature you hold. Boeheim, Krzyzewski, Williams, you guys have tremendous stature within your fan base that you can help educate. You can only talk about it. You can show it because you do it on the floor with your teams. I think the passion you just gave that to us would be huge if you gave that passion to your fan base. It may even change the thought process of people.
I hope a lot of them are listening, Ernie. I hope a lot of them are listening to understand you are my friend and been my friend for a long time. And all of a sudden we look at this stuff. We want to make a difference. Help us. And I would say our own players, all of us as coaches. Frank, what you're doing to go down to Washington, I absolutely love it. Now, what are we going to have you say to these senators? And I will go with you. I would love to do it. What are we going to say?
I think
what are we going to go in with?
Yeah,
what is the plan?
Well, but you got to put them on the spot. We got to have something that we're directly involved with, which is education on college campuses. You know, we're graduating minorities at the highest rate in the history of college basketball. And they're meddling in our business and creating an avenue where now we're going to start graduating them less. And the transfers, they're meddling in our business. So by them getting in our business, now they've opened the door to have to listen to the whole business. And now when you sit them there, Cal, like for example, if every one of us flew in there and the senator from each one of our states is there and we get a sit down with them, which is my mission, and we go back and they say, hey, Senator, why is this neighborhood and its educational opportunities for every kid in that neighborhood been so bad for 50 years? When is someone going to do something about it? You got to give them real numbers and then make them understand, like, we coach every young African-American. I mean, it's 354 Division I and keep going times, what is it, 70%? So 10 of our 13 guys. And that's a lot of votes, man. And we're going to get behind, not telling them who to vote for, but to vote. And then we have these here's my biggest, police brutality and all this stuff. Have a conversation with your players about it. 4 years ago, I had a 3-hour conversation with them. This past team, one person asked me a question. One person. And it was a Hispanic kid that asked the question. And I'm telling them, listen, I'm getting ready to go fight for you. And their parents were on the call. The parents didn't say anything. And I'm telling them, like, you've trusted me with your kids. I'm not letting this go. I'm going to go fight to make this better. Won't say anything. And we have to learn how to talk. We don't talk, man. We don't talk. Like, a bunch of those young kids that are protesting, they have no idea what they're fighting for.
Yeah. Well, Frank,
none of those 23-year-olds, Ron, saw what Calvin saw growing up in North Carolina.
No question. But I want to try to move it along here a little bit. But I had a question that I wanted to kind of end it with, and I know we've got some time. I have a couple things, but when Colin Kaepernick took a knee, and it came to our campuses about how is college basketball going to handle kneeling before the flag. And on our campuses, some campuses move the national anthem around. Some they wanted everything but kneeling. And now we look at what Kaepernick was standing for at this particular time and say, you know what? I bet that a lot of people would kind of go with that. And so did we miss, is this another opportunity? Could we have spoken up more at that particular time? Not about the flag, because this isn't about the flag. And when Kaepernick took the knee, it wasn't about the flag. But on our campuses, it became about the flag. And so I'm hearing various student athlete groups talk about what they can do to start the season and some of those things. But I'm curious, just on your campuses, did we miss that boat when that happened?
Yes, and I think it goes back to what Cal said. I don't understand that I don't understand. I understand that I don't understand. Is that right, Cal? I know what you said. I understand I don't understand. And nobody's wrong. It's not about, well, you're right and I'm wrong. You know, the great thing about the flag is that we have the right to disagree. We have the right to give an opinion. Whatever your opinion is, I have the opinion I have the right to give mine. But when you look back, and you know, sometimes we hear, but we don't listen. You know, everybody heard that he was just kneeling down. That's what they heard. That's what they saw. But their belief system was different. He was kneeling for racial injustice. He was kneeling for what happened to George Floyd. But the people that didn't see him saw that he was disrespecting the flag. To him, it wasn't about the flag. It was about George Floyd. Get your knee off my neck. That's what he was kneeling for. He wasn't disrespecting the flag. And now, maybe now, I think people are starting to listen.
I think this country puts us all in a box. I'm Hispanic American. You're Black African American. You're Jewish American. You go to France and there's a brother walking down the street and you say, yo, what are you? I'm French. You go to Canada, they don't say I'm African Canadian. They say I'm Canadian. So in this country, we've learned to kind of accept getting put in a box. And when you do what Colin did and you step out of the box, you got to have balls, number one. You got to have courage. But when you step out of the box that this country's putting you in, everyone that don't live in your box, antennas go up right away. Antennas go up right away. So now you better be ready to represent what you're stepping out of the box for, or you lose your audience. Colin Kaepernick lost me, Calvin, because when he did what he did, I was like, wow, that's strong. And then he gets up to give his press conference on why he did it. And it's about oppression and what's the other word? It was about oppression of people being oppressed.
Systematic racism.
Just there you go. And then he's wearing a shirt that's got Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. In my lifetime, the two biggest oppressors of people and the two biggest mass murderers of Black people in the world. And that's what he's wearing, representing that moment. I'm not saying he lost everybody, but he lost me. And he lost other people like me that would be on his side on this topic. But he lost me. So I'm not criticizing him. I just told you, he stepped out of the box. Mm-hmm. In a world where, Ernie, you just said, they got a bigger problem with minority hirings than we got in college basketball. And when he stepped out of that box against all those wealthy white folks that own those teams, there was a lot of people uncomfortable. He needed me to be an ally. I'm an ally for what's wrong, but I can't stand with him. And I told our players this. I told them, you guys want to kneel, I get it, but I can't kneel. And this is why I can't kneel. And they understood. But that's part of that genuine conversation that I think we have to have with our players.
Right. What you said right there, Frank, is what we need. Pat said it earlier, education.
That's
education.
Calvin, it's coming to your campuses. And I think for all the listeners out there, viewers out there to listen to this, you need to educate yourself and get ready, because what's coming back to your campuses is not what left your campus, because you're coming back with an educated group of young people that have been listening to activists. They're listening to elderly people about racism. They may be more educated than you. So in some cases, you might need to start your meetings by listening rather than talking to what their agenda is, because they are coming back. All of this energy is coming back to our college campuses. And as coaches and as leaders, you've got to be able to allow these young people to vent. You've got to allow them to maybe set a new course of direction. You may have to protest or march with them because they're coming. And there's no way you're going to be able to address them with anything that's not the truth. They're going to see right through you. You've got to be honest. You've got to be able to show your compassion, and you've got to be ready to lead or be led by them, because the agenda has changed in this country. And college presidents and athletic directors need to get ready as well as to what's coming back to these college campuses.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Last night I get a call that all the black student athletes at Tulane decided to have their own Zoom call. And before all the football, track, basketball, before they all came on campus, they wanted to unite and talk. And so again, I was pleased in the sense that they organized that. And so that goes to your point that they're going to come back different. And we all have to sit, we're going to have to listen to them and be a part of it. But Tom,
hey, Ron, question for you guys, because Cal asked the question is, how can we make change? You know, when in all the athletic departments we have, because we all have them, staff meetings, and they bring in someone to speak about Title IX or race or anything like that. Have they ever asked any of you who coach all the African Americans or the football coaches, who's a good person to bring in? They always, now there's no African Americans in athletic administration, very few, but they find somebody to come in and speak. And I don't know about you guys, I always leave those meetings insulted because I know what the journey is. I might not have felt what it is to walk in the shoes of an African American, but I've been right next to it my whole life. So I know what the journey is. And they bring in these people to speak that politically correct mumbo jumbo. I sit there and I tune them out because nothing they say is true. You know, I think we should be a lot more involved in identifying somebody that can come in and speak real to the people that work in the athletic departments, because then those are the ones that have to go communicate with the college student. And I'm a big believer in that. By the way, on my campus, they keep me away. We love you. We love you. We don't need you in these conversations.
Well, guys, what I would like to do, and I can't tell you how much I've appreciated this, and I think I've talked to even Ernie about this. Let's make sure this isn't our last one. Yeah. This isn't something that we can just do, and hell, I don't have to host it, but I hope, Tom, that we continue to have and reach out and do these type of things. But what I'd like each of you to do before we get off is to, as a final comment, just how you would like to leave it, and I'll start off. The reason that I wanted to do this, and I called each of you, outside of you guys being my friends, is that when this happened and I saw it, you guys talked about being outraged, but I'll be honest with you, I was tired. I've seen so much racism. I've been in an interracial relationship. The things that have been said to me and to my wife over the years, I was tired. I was mad, but I was more tired that I can't believe at 56 years old, I got to continue to do this. And then hearing certain people talk, I was tired of hearing the same old thing. And I turned the social media off because I'm tired. A tweet's not going to do it. A like or that's not going to do it. And so I wanted to bring some people together so we can, do something about it, like John had talked about. But I felt defeated, to be honest with you. As a coach, as a black man, that I felt like, man, the world is defeating me. And so even after this conversation and hearing you guys, I feel much better about it. But, watching him and watching what happened to Mr. Floyd just reminded me of so many of the things that I've had to go through in my life. And so I appreciate you guys. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing this. From Pat to John to Gary, Ernie, Kelvin, and Frank, we all have to continue to do better. Our profession has to do better. The NCAA has to do better. The NABC has to do better. We all have to do better. And if we don't, then we're part of the problem. We're not part of the solution. And so, again, I appreciate that. And I'll start with you, Kelvin, and let you have your word, and we'll kind of go down through the list here.
I was talking with Frank Haith not too long ago, and I told him, and it kind of goes on what you were talking about a while ago, Pat. Remember we had our conference meeting, head coaches meeting by Zoom. I said, we do have coaches versus cancer. Maybe we need to have coaches versus racism, and have that as a platform from something we can build on. Right now, I think the country's trying to come together on this. We've had so much to pull us apart. This is something that's kind of pulling us together. There's a lot of people that are going from being passive aggressive about racism to being anti-racism, and it's I see more white people that are intermingling with brown and black people. And I think if coaches, I don't know the answers, but I think if we start there and challenge each conference and the coaches to educate, make sure our kids understand what the electoral process is, make sure they vote, make sure they understand why they're voting. Somebody said that, we have a black mayor here in Houston. We have a police chief that's a person of color. Well, those are elected positions. We voted those people in. And that's how you make change that's real, is put people in those positions. And that starts with the electoral process. So, but that's something that can come from coaches versus racism. That's something that we can touch.
Thanks, Coach. Frank?
Yeah, to piggyback on what Kelvin, funny, what he just said, it's kind of where my brain was at, because it involves the lawmakers, the decision makers, the elected officials. Who usually gets elected to all these places? People that are supported by the people that got the cheese. Who's the ones that are making most of the donation? Rich white folks. So then they get to these jobs and they forget about us because they want to stay in office, and they start paying attention to the people that gave the money for these PACs and super PACs and all that stuff that's called to stay in office, because those are the ones that came up with the money. So we have to make sure that we don't stop. We can't just talk about these things on election years. These are conversations that need to be strong every single day. The day that you stop fighting cancer, there's a new form of cancer that pops up and kills everybody. We have to keep fighting cancer. What do you do to fight cancer? You got to educate. You got to raise funds. And then you got to attack it. Well, it's the same way when you're dealing with racism. You got to educate. You got to raise funds. Coaches versus racism. You got to raise funds to create jobs, to create things. And then you have to attack it. How do you attack it? Well, we got to make sure that every person of power, in a position of power, that comes from a minority background, man, don't forget about us. Don't forget about us. You went into office to fight for us, but all of a sudden, it's all politically correct, this stuff now. You have to keep fighting for us. And the only way they know that is if because we have a platform. We can't join that crowd that starts worrying about not losing our jobs because we're not willing to stand up for what's right. We owe it to the John Thompsons and the Cheneys and the George Ravelings of the world. But those guys, as powerful and as strong men as they were, to your point earlier, Kelvin, they needed Dean Smith to give them cover. Dean Smith stepped in, and all of a sudden it all changed right away. Why? Unity, guys that believe in each other. And I think that's the power that we can create as coaches.
Thanks, appreciate that. Pat?
Hey, Ron, thanks for having me on again. I appreciate you, buddy. It's great to be on with all these great coaches. For me, it's again what Kelvin just said. He said, John and Pat, it comes with you. It starts with you. And he's exactly right. We've been silent. I've been silent too long. Cal's never silent, but I've been silent too long. And I need to get involved in the conversation. So, Kelvin, you're correct. And I agree with you. It starts with our faith. And That's where the foundation is. Our faith is number one. And then at home for me, in my upbringing, in my children today, faith, home. And then we've been saying it, and everybody's been saying it. It's our education, especially in the city. And I'm sorry, I keep thinking of Philadelphia, but that's how I'm thinking. So we got to help some way with our education. And then, you know, the platform of CVC, it's right there in front of us. The formula is there. The model works. It's super successful. For me, that's how we can continue the discussion and be consistent in what we want to do and gain real traction here. And obviously the voting is huge. Most of our guys voted, but it wasn't 100%. So I need to do better there. I need to do better there, and we will do better. We will give that day off on November 3rd. But I think for me, our mantra is going to be, if it happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. If it happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. If you don't follow Rick Warren, you should. The great pastor out there who can shed some light at any time. But thanks again for having me, guys.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. Ernie?
You know, my coaching profession started in Saudi Arabia, spending 7 years there. And it's sad to say, being also in an interracial marriage at the time, it was more accepted who I was as a man in a foreign country than it was when I came back here to the United States and started my career. And I think the fact that I have to every day remind my kids who they are, the opportunities that they have in front of them, how lucky they are. I just want to say to all of these coaches, we have an enormous platform. You're in a business that generates $1 billion with March Madness. We have a huge amount of control. All of us have been successful. If we do not use resources and voices, then again, shame on us. We are facing a time in the NCAA where transferring is going to potentially rip the coaching profession apart because it's recruiting off each other's campus. We can't let that happen. Our voice together is a very, very strong, powerful voice. This has been awesome to be able to do this, but I think real talk, straight talk, I think difficult conversations are going to continue to be needed. But I am encouraged by my brethren on the phone, what I've heard, my brothers that are here. I appreciate you guys, particularly you, John Pat, for being here and speaking like you've spoken. It has been awesome. So just take this opportunity to really lead your players, lead your communities to vote. Because the voting takes care of the local level, the government level, and the national level. We have got to organize to vote. That's probably even more important than what's going to happen as to whether or not we play football, basketball, what's going on in college athletics. It's ultimately, if you want to talk about fighting racism, you have got to have the right people in place that will put policies in place that will help us immensely. We can't do this by ourselves. And I think we all know that, but it can start with us. So I appreciate being a part of this.
Thanks, Ernie. And Gary?
Yep. Thanks again, Ron, for having me. I harken back to a conversation I had with Cal, and the thing that I got from that conversation is that he wants to get it right. And I started to talk to other brethren in the business, and so many coaches want to get this right. And although it's an inconvenient truth, I know it's uncomfortable. This is our time, and this is an opportunity. It starts, and again, Ron, this is why I thank you so much for this, because it starts with this type of dialogue and this kind of conversation. We obviously have got to put some action steps to the dialogue to move forward, but people are wanting to get answers to this. One of the most profound questions of the day was the high school coach that has an all-white staff, has all-white players, and a predominantly white community. He wants to get it right. And we need to really continue to talk, come up with the proper action steps that we can really make a difference. Because I think, Ron, you again said it best about being tired. And the fatigue comes in the same mountain and little to no change. You go back and say, we're right back here again. We're right back with Eric Gardner again. We're right back with the litany of people that we can name on this conversation. Our time is now. and our students desperately need us. I think that Kelvin made a great point in terms of getting behind racism as a body, as a coaching body. We do have tremendous platform to be able to speak. I think we need to just wrap that into something that we all believe in, and we can actually make change, because our opportunity is now, and we can move the needle. We can do that.
Thanks, Gary. Really appreciate you. And my brother, Mr. Calipari.
Well, Ron, again, thanks. And thanks to everybody on this call. You guys know, each of you, what I think of you and how much I respect you. When I see these protests and I see old and young and white and black and brown and yellow, and what I see, man and woman, I know now there's hope. I want to tell all those people and all the coaches out there that I'm here, that I'm not going anywhere, that it's not about this week and next week. It's about the long haul. And Kelvin, I agree with what you say, and Gary, what you said. People like me have to be the agents of change, but you got to be willing to step out and take some bows and arrows and some shots. I'm willing to do that. I think for me, creating access and opportunity is the number one thing I think I can do, but I'm willing to listen and continue to listen. Help me be what you need me to be. This is not changing overnight. The conversation here was enlightening to me. But Gary, what I told you, we got to get this right. We have this opportunity now to get this right. Frank, when you go to DC, have your three-pronged plan. Here's what we want. This, and this. Walk in and let's be organized and get it done. The immediate police brutality, crime, and justice system, I wish somebody could help me. I'd help if I could, but I don't see where I fit in there. I know it's wrong. I know it's ugly, and it must change. We got to demand it. So I'll say this to end, and I understand that I may never understand, but I will stand with you.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate that. So again, I can't thank you guys enough. I'm sorry.
Ron, that high school coach that Tom talked about, please put him in touch with me. Because if I have to come to him, I can help him, and I can help his staff, and I'm willing to do that. I will come to him if need be. So please have him, Tom, put him in touch with me, okay?
If you're out there, no, I just say this. If you're out there, because it was anonymous, just send me your phone number or your email address, and I'll get it to Coach Ken.
Thanks,
Okay.
Tom.
Ron, before we wrap up, I'm going to get myself in trouble with Tom if I don't direct everybody to the NABC website. There are some action steps that we encourage coaches to take. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but there are 4 different bullets there. One of them being team communication, student-athlete engagement, connect with internal and external leaders, and the 4th one, become an advocate. And I think that's a great place for all of us to go and start really try to reach your tentacles out to your coaching brethren, your friends, your family, to gain more wisdom, to gain insight, to more knowledge. But again, I'll turn this back over to you, Ron, but we can really make a difference. And I think it starts here.
Hey, Kelvin.
Yes.
To your point, right now, this isn't about black folks learning how they've been treated. It's about white folks understanding and coming to grips how black folks have been treated. So the white folks are the ones that need to be educated. And these are great things for white coaches to be able to talk to their players about.
That's going to move the needle.
Yes, sir.
And guys, we started off by saying this: education through conversation. And again, we have to continue to have the conversation. We have to keep this going. And And again, I just want to say it again. I really, truly appreciate all of you because, again, I feel better. I feel, renewed. And I needed that because, again, as I said, it's been a tough week because I have felt really tired. And I appreciate, Tom, I really appreciate this. All started with a conversation I had with you. And I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to be able to do this at this particular time and setting this up. So you want to close us out?
Ron, I would just echo one thing for you, all of you. If you ever want to have another, all you have to say is when and who you want on, and we'll get it done. And we're going to send out the NABC, their mission or the action steps. We're going to send it to everybody that was on the call and put it on Twitter also.
Good.
I appreciate everybody. Thanks for being involved. Troy,
Hey,
great.
Ron. Hey, Ron.
Thanks.
Yes,
Tom.
sir.
Before I let you go, I got to make you feel better, man. We're a lot closer than you think, man. We've made so much progress.
And we're
I'm
making progress.
right in the middle. I'm like, hey, Kelvin, they're talking about being in biracial marriages. My wife says she's in a multiracial marriage every time.
Hey, go take another pill, brother.
Ron, hey,
With a shot of scotch with it.
There you go. That's what you got to do.
Ass to bed.
Oh,
Your wife will love you more.
Be safe.
Love you
Take care,
guys.
guys. Thanks
See you
again.
guys. Thanks for having me on. Take care, guys. God bless.
Take care now.